For 33 years, I was the boring, reliable daughter who never made a scene. So when my parents quietly drained my grandmother's inheritance money, explicitly left to me and gave it to my younger sister, they assumed I would just swallow the insult. They told me not to be selfish. They didn't realize that by taking what was mine, they had forced me to trade my silence for a paper trail that would eventually cost them everything. I have lived in Harbor Ridge, Maine, for my entire life, and if you asked anyone in town to describe me, they would likely use the word reliable. They might also use the word boring, though they would probably say it with a polite smile. I am 33 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for the local fisheries cooperative, a job that involves staring at spreadsheets, tracking shipment times, and ensuring that crates of lobster and haddock move from the docks to the distributors without a single error. I like the work. It makes sense. Numbers do not lie. Schedules do not have hidden agendas. If a truck is late, there is a reason, and I can find it. My life is quiet by design. I rent a small, tidy apartment on the second floor of a converted Victorian house on Elm Street. I pay my rent on the first of every month. I pay my electric bill the day it arrives. I have a credit score that I'm proud of, and a savings account that grows slowly, $20 at a time, to my parents, Gordon and Lila Stewart. This existence is a tragedy. They have always viewed my stability as a lack of imagination. They treat my ability to balance a checkbook not as a skill, but as a personality defect, proof that I lack the spark that defines our family. That spark was reserved for my younger sister, Marissa. Marissa was the firework. I was the pavement she exploded over. When my grandmother, Eloise Hart, passed away in late October, the grief hit me like a physical weight. Eloise was the only person in my family who did not look at me and see a resource to be managed. She saw me. She was a woman of sharp wit and quiet strength. The kind of person who kept her money in a coffee tin until she learned about high-yield savings accounts, at which point she became a ruthless investor. She taught me that independence was the only luxury that mattered. The funeral was a blur of polite condolences and damp wool coats. My parents held court in the front row. Weeping dramatically, Marissa arrived late, wearing oversized sunglasses and looking devastatingly fragile, clinging to my father's arm. I stood in the back, organizing the reception catering, making sure the coffee urns were full. That was my role. The griever who handles the logistics, 2 weeks after the funeral. I received a voicemail from my father. I was at work, watching a forklift load pallets onto a truck, when my phone buzzed. I stepped into the break room to listen. "Vivian, it is Dad," his voice said. The recording sounded tinny, and there was a strange, breathless quality to his tone, as if he were rushing through lines he had rehearsed in a mirror. "Call us back when you get this. We need to talk about the estate. There is something for you. We need to get this sorted out quickly." He did not say he loved me. He did not ask how I was doing. He just sounded nervous. The reading of the will took place on a Tuesday morning at Ketter & Rowe Legal Services, a modest law firm squeezed between a bakery and a hardware store on Main Street. The carpet in the waiting room was a faded navy blue, and the air smelled of old paper and peppermint. Mr. Ketter was a man in his 70s with liver spots on his hands and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. He sat behind a desk that looked large enough to land a plane on. My parents and Marissa were not there. Mr. Ketter explained that they had come in separately the day before. This struck me as odd, but I pushed the thought away. I sat alone in the leather chair, my hands folded in my lap. "Eloise was very clear about her wishes regarding you. Vivian," Mr. Ketter said, adjusting his glasses. He slid a document across the desk. I read the paragraph he pointed to. It was simple. It stated that the sum of $85,000 was to be bequeathed to Vivian Stewart, explicitly for the purpose of purchasing a primary residence. I felt tears prick my eyes. Eloise and I had talked about this for years. I had spent my 20s saving every spare dime, dreaming of a small cottage near the rocky shoreline. Something that belonged to me, something no landlord could take away. Eloise knew that. She had whispered it to me once over tea, telling me that she was putting something aside to help me cross the finish line. It is a specific bequest, Mr. Ketter said, separate from the residual estate. $85,000. In Harbor Ridge. That was a down payment. That was a foundation. That was the rest of my life beginning. I walked out of the office feeling lightheaded. The gray sky seemed brighter. The cold wind off the Atlantic felt bracing rather than biting. I wanted to call someone, but the only person I wanted to tell was Eloise. Before I could even process the reality of the money, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Vivian," she said. Her voice was bright. Too bright. Like a fluorescent light humming in an empty room. "Dad and I want you to come over for dinner tonight. Marissa is here. We are ordering Italian. Come over around 6. I agreed. I assumed they wanted to discuss the logistics, or perhaps just be together as a family now that the legal formalities were done. I drove to their house that evening with a bottle of red wine on the passenger seat. My parents live in a sprawling colonial on the wealthier side of town, a house that looks impressive from the street, but feels tired on the inside. The paint in the hallway is peeling slightly, and the furniture is beautiful but threadbare. They have spent their lives maintaining the appearance of wealth, a performance that requires constant energy. When I walked in, the house smelled of garlic and oregano. My father was pouring wine in the kitchen, his movements jerky. My mother was arranging garlic bread in a basket. Marissa was sitting at the island, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled, a dazzling, effortless expression that always made me feel plain. "Hey, Viv," she said. "Hi, Marissa," I said. I set the wine down. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the set with the gold rim that we were never allowed to touch as children. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother to his right, Marissa to his left. I took the seat opposite my father. We ate in a strange, suspended silence for the first 20 minutes. My mother talked about the weather. My father complained about the town council's decision to repave the high school parking lot. Marissa picked at her lasagna. Finally, as the plates were being cleared, my father cleared his throat. He set his fork down with a definitive clink. "So," he said, "you went to see Mr. Ketter today?" I nodded. "I did. It was very kind of Grandma Eloise. I did not realize she had set aside that much." My mother reached out and touched my hand. Her palm was damp. "Vivian, honey, we need to talk to you about that. About the money," I asked. "Yes," my father said. He looked at the wall behind me, avoiding my eyes. "It is a complicated time for the family. We have all been through a lot. Loss changes things. It makes us reevaluate priorities." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "What do you mean?" Marissa sighed. A long, dramatic exhalation. She looked up from her plate. "They mean the money is gone, Viv. Or, not gone, just handled." I looked at her, then at my parents. "I do not understand. Mr. Ketter said there was a bequest. $85,000. There was," my father said. "But as the executors of the estate, your mother and I had to make some executive decisions based on the immediate needs of the family unit." "Immediate needs?" I asked. My voice sounded very small in the large room. "Marissa is going through a transition," my mother said quickly. She squeezed my hand harder. "You know she has had a rough year with the studio closing. She has debts. Vivian, scary debts. And she has this wonderful opportunity to start fresh in Boston, a partnership. But she needs capital now, not in 6 months. Now." I pulled my hand away. "Wait, are you saying you gave the money to Marissa?" "We did not give it to her," my father said, his voice rising in defensiveness. "We reallocated the resources. It is a family loan. An investment in your sister's future, but that was my inheritance." I said, "Eloise left it to me, for a house, and you have a job." Marissa interrupted. She looked at me with wide, incredulous eyes. "You are fine, Viv. You always land on your feet. You pay your bills. You are so stable. I am drowning here. Grandma would not have wanted me to drown while you sat on a pile of cash just to buy a house you do not even need yet." I stared at them. The logic was so twisted, I could barely untangle it. You took the money. Without asking me, Vivian. Do not be selfish. My mother snapped. The tone was sharp. A reflex. It was the same tone she used when I was 10 and didn't want to share my birthday candy. We are talking about your sister's survival. We are a family. We help each other. It is $85,000, I said, pronouncing every syllable. That is not help. That is a theft. My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Watch your mouth, young lady. We are your parents. We have supported you your entire life. We made a judgment call. You took my money. I repeated, it is already handled, Marissa said, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. I already sent the wire for the lease in Boston. It is done. I will pay you back when the business takes off. I promise. Okay, can we please just have dessert now? Mom made that cheesecake you like. She stood up and walked toward the kitchen, her hips swaying. She acted as if we had just discussed borrowing a sweater, not a life-altering sum of money. I sat frozen. I looked at my parents. They were looking at me with a mixture of defiance and expectation. They expected me to fold. That was the script. I was the reliable one. I was the one who absorbed the shock so the boat wouldn't rock. When will you pay it back? I asked. I forced my voice to remain steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. We do not have a specific date. Vivian, pressure is not going to help Marissa succeed. She needs room to breathe. So there is no plan, I asked. The plan is family. My mother cried out, Why do you have to be so cold? Why does everything have to be a transaction with you? You sit there with your judgment and your steady paycheck and you look down on us. I am not looking down on you. I said, I am asking where my inheritance went. My father stood up. I think you should leave. Vivian, if you are going to come into our house and interrogate us after we just fed you, you can leave. We are grieving. We do not need this stress. I stood up. My legs felt numb. I looked at the three of them. Marissa was in the kitchen doorway, holding a cake knife, watching me with a bored expression. My parents were standing shoulder to shoulder, a united front of wounded righteousness. I walked to the door. I did not say goodbye. I walked out into the cool night air, got into my 10-year-old sedan, and drove home in silence. I did not turn on the radio. I could not hear anything over the sound of the phrase repeating in my mind. Do not be selfish. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the wall. I did not cry. I felt something else, a slow, hardening sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a door closing, a lock turning. The next day, I went to work. I focused on the spreadsheets. I tracked a shipment of scallops to Portland. I answered emails. I kept my face blank. When I got home, there was an envelope in my mailbox. It was a thin white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy, a grainy, black and white copy of a document titled Waiver of Beneficiary Rights and Consent to Transfer. I scanned the page. It was legal jargon, paragraphs about releasing claims and authorizing the executor to distribute funds at their discretion. And there, at the bottom, was a signature line. On the line was the name Vivian Stewart. I brought the paper closer to the light. The signature was looped and slanted. It looked vaguely like mine, in the way a caricature looks like a person, but the capital Phi was too flourish. The T was crossed with a sharp upward strike. I do not cross my T's like that. I cross them straight. Stuck to the photocopy was a yellow sticky note. It was my mother's handwriting. This is what you agreed to. Let us move forward with love. Mom. I stared at the note. I had not agreed to anything. I had not signed this document. My hands started to shake. I put the paper down on my kitchen counter. I walked to the sink and drank a glass of water. Then I walked back and looked at it again. They had forged my signature. The realization made me feel sick. It was one thing to bully me into silence. It was another thing entirely to commit fraud. They were so confident that I would not fight back that they had committed a crime and mailed me the evidence, assuming I would just file it away and feel guilty for causing trouble. I sat down at my small kitchen table. I thought about calling the police. The thought terrified me. I thought about calling a lawyer. That terrified me too. I am not a litigious person. I am the person who apologizes when someone else bumps into me in the grocery store. But then I thought about Eloise. I thought about the coffee tin. I thought about her voice telling me to buy a house. If I did nothing, I was agreeing with them. I was agreeing that I did not matter. I was agreeing that I was nothing more than a resource for Marissa to consume. I stood up and went to my closet. I pulled down a plastic bin from the top shelf. It was full of old birthday cards, letters, and keepsakes. I dumped them onto the floor. I needed to find my baseline. I needed to prove to myself that I was not crazy. I spent the next 3 hours sorting through every piece of paper Eloise had ever given me. I found birthday checks from 10 years ago. I found a postcard from her trip to Florida. I found a letter she wrote me when I graduated college. In the letter, she wrote, "I am so proud of the woman you are becoming. You are strong. Vivian. Stronger than you know. Keep your head up. I am making sure you will be protected. Even when I am gone." I held the letter against my chest. "Making sure you will be protected." She knew. She knew what they were like. She knew they would try to take it. I took a picture of the letter with my phone. Then I started a new folder on my laptop. I named it Evidence. I scanned the forged waiver. I saved the voicemail from my father. I wrote down a transcript of the conversation at dinner, typing out every word I could remember while it was still fresh. The next morning, on my lunch break, I called North Coast Community Bank. That was where Eloise banked. I knew the name because I had driven her there 100 times. I navigated the automated menu until I got a real person on the line. "North Coast Community. This is Sarah speaking. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "My name is Vivian Stewart. My grandmother, Eloise Hart, passed away recently. I am a beneficiary in her will, and I had a question about a specific account. I am sorry for your loss." "Ms. Stewart," Sarah said. "One moment. Let me pull up the file. Do you have the estate tax ID number?" "I do not," I said, "but I can give you her social security number and date of birth." There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "Okay, I see the profile here," Sarah said. "However, I am looking at the status, and, what is it?" I asked. "Well, normally for an estate inquiry, I would transfer you to our probate department," Sarah said. "But this account is no longer in the estate flow." I gripped the phone tighter. "What does that mean? No longer in the estate flow?" "It means the funds have already been dispersed and the account is closed," she said. "It looks like it was handled through a transfer authorization prior to the final probate clearance, or perhaps it was a joint account structure. I cannot see the specific mechanism from my screen, but the balance is 0 and the file is archived. Dispersed when I asked. Let me see. The date of the closure was November 2nd. November 2nd. That was 3 days after the funeral. That was 2 weeks before the will reading. Thank you." "Sarah," I said. I hung up the phone. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the fishery coop, watching the seagulls circle over the dumpsters. They had moved the money before the will was even read. They had cleaned her out while the earth on her grave was still fresh. The dinner, the argument, the executive decision, it was all theater. They had taken the money weeks ago, and the signature. They must have used the forged signature to bypass the probate hold. They needed me to authorize the transfer, or at least appear to authorize it, to get the bank to release the funds that quickly. I looked at the gray ocean. I felt a cold anger settling in my stomach, heavy and permanent like a stone. They thought I was boring. They thought I was safe. They thought I would cry for a few days, and then go back to paying my bills and keeping the peace. I started the engine of my car. I am not going to be safe. I whispered to the empty car. I drove back to the office. I walked to my desk. I opened a spreadsheet, and then I opened a second window on my browser and searched for property records in the county, if they wanted to play games with paper. They were about to learn that paper is the only thing I truly understand. The conflict inside me was still there, the daughter who wanted to be good, who wanted her parents to love her. But the voice of the reliable daughter was getting quieter. A new voice was starting to speak. It sounded a lot like Eloise. I worked through the afternoon, but my mind was not on lobsters. It was on the timeline. November 2nd, the forgery, the don't be selfish. They had built a narrative where I was the villain for asking questions. They were about to find out what happens when the villain decides to stop asking and starts writing everything down. I printed out the county tax records for my parents' house. I printed out the business registration for Marissa's failed studio. I put them in my bag. The sun went down over Harbor Ridge, turning the sky a bruised purple. I drove home. The envelope with the forgery sitting on the passenger seat next to me, it felt radioactive. I walked into my apartment and locked the door. I took the sticky note off the photocopy. This is what you agreed to. I taped the note to my refrigerator. It would be the first thing I saw every morning. A reminder, a fuel source. I picked up my phone and saw a text from Marissa. Hope you are not still mad. Family first. Right. Love you. I did not reply. I turned off my phone. I sat in the dark and listened to the wind rattle the window frames. I was done being the daughter they wanted. I was ready to become the woman Eloise paid for. The investigation had begun. I just didn't know yet how deep the rot went. But I was going to find out. I had a pen, I had a notebook, and I had the one thing they never expected me to have the patience to wait for them to make a mistake. And looking at the sloppy loop of that V on the signature line, I realized they had already made their first one. They underestimated the person who checks the details. The reception area of Ketter and Rowe Legal Services looked exactly as it had the week before, a study in beige and dust, but I felt like a different person walking into it. The first time, I had been a grieving granddaughter hoping for a keepsake. Now, I was a detective in a cardigan, hiding my suspicion behind a mask of polite confusion. I approached the desk. The receptionist was out, but a paralegal I had seen briefly during the reading was organizing files behind the counter. Her nameplate read Janet. She looked up, her expression guarded. "Can I help you?" "Ms. Stewart?" she asked. I gave her my best apologetic smile, the one I used when a delivery driver arrived late, and I needed to smooth things over without assigning blame. "Hi, Janet," I said. "I am so sorry to bother you. I know Mr. Ketter is busy. I just had a few questions about the timeline of the estate closing. I feel like I missed some details during the reading because I was so emotional. I just want clarity so I can put my mind at rest." Janet relaxed slightly. She was likely used to confused airs. What kind of details? I just wanted to check the dates. I said, "My father mentioned that things moved very quickly. I was wondering when the initial probate filings were submitted." Janet pulled a folder from a stack on her left. She flipped it open. "Oh, yes. This was a very efficient file. Your parents were very proactive. They brought in the waiver and the expedited handling request just 3 days after the passing. 3 days. I kept my smile fixed, though my stomach gave a hard, unpleasant lurch. "That is fast," I said. "Faster than most families manage." Janet agreed. Closing the folder. "Usually, people take weeks to locate the will and get organized, but your mother seemed to have all the paperwork ready to go. She was very organized." I nodded. My mother was organized. My mother was the kind of woman who color-coded her spice rack but forgot my eye color. "Is it possible to get a copy of those filings?" I asked. "Just for my own records. I like to keep everything together." Janet hesitated, then shrugged. "You are a named beneficiary in the will, even if the specific bequest was handled. I do not see why not." She walked to the copier. The rhythmic whoosh click of the machine sounded like a countdown in the quiet office. She returned with a stapled stack of papers. "Here you go," she said. "Thank you." "Janet," I said, "you have been so helpful." I walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and waited until my hands stopped trembling before I looked at the papers. I flipped past the standard cover sheets until I found the form titled Appointment of Authorized Representative. It was a document designating my father as the primary point of contact for the estate. giving him the authority to receive all notices and communications on behalf of the beneficiaries. I scanned down to the section listing beneficiary contact information. There was my name, Vivian Stewart, and next to it, under address, was not my apartment on Elm Street. It was a post office box in the neighboring town of Wells. I stared at the box number. I did not have a post office box in Wells. I looked closer at the handwriting. The numbers were written in blue ink. The 8s were made of 2 separate circles, stacked on top of each other like snowmen. The 7s had a small, decorative hook at the top. It was my mother's handwriting. She had filled out my contact information with a fake address to ensure that any official notices from the court or the bank would go to a box only she could access. They had not just stolen the money, they had systematically cut the lines of communication so I would not hear the alarm bells ringing. I felt a hot flush of shame. It was not the shame of doing something wrong. It was the shame of being the victim. It was the humiliation of realizing that while I was grieving my grandmother, my parents were filling out forms to erase me. I drove to their house. I did not call first. It was a Saturday afternoon. My father would be watching golf. My mother would be looking at gardening catalogs. They would be comfortable. They would be feeling safe. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Marissa's convertible parked behind my father's SUV. Good. Everyone was there. I walked up the front steps and let myself in. The door was unlocked. It was always unlocked. In Harbor Ridge, people believed in the illusion of safety. I found them in the sunroom. My father was indeed watching golf, the volume low. My mother was flipping through a magazine. Marissa was painting her nails on the coffee table, the smell of acetone sharp and chemical in the air. They looked up as I entered. My mother's smile was tight, cautious. "Vivian," she said, "we were not expecting you." I did not sit down. I stood near the doorway, holding the manila envelope from the law office. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the vase of hydrangeas against the wall, but I knew that if I lost my temper, they would win. They would paint me as hysterical, unstable, irrational. So I forced myself to be the thing they hated most, calm. I went to the lawyer's office today. I said, my father hit the mute button on the remote. The silence in the room became heavy. "Why would you do that?" he asked. His voice was level, but his eyes narrowed. I wanted to see the paperwork. I said, "I found the form listing the beneficiary contact info." My mother closed her magazine. She placed it deliberately on the side table. "Vivian, please, do not start this again. I am not starting anything." I said, "I am finishing it." "Mom, you filled out my contact information with a post office box in Wells, a box I do not own." She blinked. It was a tiny, fluttery movement. I was helping. She said, "You are so busy with work. We handled the administrative side so you would not be burdened." By diverting my mail, I asked, "We were protecting you from the paperwork," she cried out, her voice pitching up. "Why do you always look for the worst in us? We are your parents." I took a breath. I looked at both of them. I decided to give them one last chance, a ramp they could take to exit this highway before it went off a cliff. "Listen to me," I said. "If this was a misunderstanding, tell me now. If you borrowed the money because you were in trouble and you were too ashamed to ask, tell me now. Show me the bank statements. Show me where the money went. If we are a family, treat me like an adult and tell me the truth. We can fix a mistake. We cannot fix a lie." My father's jaw tightened. I saw the muscle jump near his ear. He looked at me with a coldness that made me feel like a stranger he had caught trespassing on his lawn. "We do not owe you an audit." "Vivian," he said, "it is my inheritance." I said, "It is family money," he corrected, "and we used it for the family. You are being incredibly petty." My mother burst into tears. It was instantaneous. 1 second she was glaring. The next she was sobbing into her hands. "I cannot believe you are doing this," she wailed. "After everything we have done for you, you are so cold. Vivian, you have always been so cold. You care more about money than you care about your own sister." I looked at Marissa. She was frozen, the nail polish brush hovering over her pinky finger. She looked back and forth between us. her eyes wide. "Marissa," I said, "did you know about the post office box?" Marissa shook her head. "No. I do not know how the legal stuff works. Did you know they signed my name on a waiver?" I asked. Marissa flinched. "They said they handled it. Viv, they just gave me the money." "All of it?" I asked. $85,000. Marissa looked down at her nails. "Not all at once. It came in chunks. For the lease, for the equipment. I do not know the total. I just assumed Mom and Dad handled the boring part." The boring part. That was me. I was the boring part. I looked back at my parents. My mother was still sobbing, but her eyes were dry as she peeked over her hands to gauge my reaction. My father was staring at the television, refusing to look at me at all. They were not going to admit it. They were not going to apologize. They truly believed that their need for the money superseded my right to it. They believed that because I was stable, I was able to be harvested. "Okay," I said. I turned around and walked out. "Vivian," my mother shouted after me. "Do not you walk away from your mother when she is crying." I kept walking. I got into my car and backed out of the driveway. I did not look back. The following Tuesday, I took a half-day off work and drove to the neighboring county. I did not want a lawyer in Harbor Ridge, in a small town. Everyone plays golf with everyone else. I needed someone who did not know my father's handicap. I found the office of Winslow and Crane in a brick building near the county courthouse. Tara Winslow was a woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and a desk that was cluttered with files. She did not have a mahogany desk or a view of the ocean. She had a half-eaten sandwich on a napkin and eyes that looked like they could read fine print in the dark. I sat in the chair opposite her and laid it all out. The will, the conversation, the voicemail, the forgery, the post office box. Tara listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the paper. "It is a mess," she said. Her voice was dry and matter-of-fact. "But it is a common mess." "What are my options?" I asked. Tara leaned back. "Well, we have a few pathways. We could file a petition to reopen the estate, alleging fraud and mismanagement. That is the nuclear option. It becomes public record. It gets ugly. If they spent the money, which they likely did, getting it back is like trying to get blood from a stone. You can get a judgment, but you cannot garnish a pension that does not exist." She paused, looking at me. "Then there is the criminal route." She continued. "Forgery is a felony. Fraud is a felony. You could go to the police, but I find that most clients do not want to see their parents in handcuffs, no matter how angry they are." I looked at my hands. I did not want them in handcuffs. I just wanted them to stop lying. "What else?" I asked. Tara sighed. "The smart play is pressure. We do not sue yet. We do not call the cops yet. We ask for an accounting. An informal accounting," she said. "We send a letter, friendly but firm. We say, 'Dear Gordon and Lila, as a beneficiary, Vivian is entitled to a clear report of the estate assets and expenses. Please provide a list of all deposits, withdrawals, and transfers regarding the specific bequest of $85,000. She leaned forward. "Here is the thing about innocent people. Vivian. When you ask innocent people for the math, they give you the math. They might be annoyed, but they show you the receipts because they want the problem to go away. Guilty people get offended. They get angry. They throw up smoke screens. And if they do not provide it, then we know," she said. "And then we file a formal demand with the court. But let us give them a chance to hang themselves with their own silence first." I hired her on the spot. I wrote a check for the retainer from my savings account, the money I had been saving for a sofa for the house I would never buy. The letter went out the next day. I read the draft before Tara sent it. It was polite. It was respectful. It used words like transparency and closure. It did not use words like theft or forgery. I waited. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was at the grocery store, standing in the aisle staring at cans of soup. It was a text message, a group text including me, my father, my mother, and Marissa. I opened it. It was a wall of text from my mother. We received your letter from a lawyer. I am shaking right now. I cannot believe a child of ours would threaten the family like this. We raised you. We paid for your braces. We paid for your car insurance when you were 17. We gave you everything, and now you sick a lawyer on us over money. This is repayment. Vivian, we invested in you for 18 years. If we needed to use some of Eloise's money to save the family, that is our right. You are rewriting history to make yourself a victim. Drop this immediately, or do not bother coming to Christmas. My father added a message below it. You are crossing a line. Vivian, this is shameful. I stood there in the soup aisle, clutching my phone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Repayment? The words stuck in my throat like a bone. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as an investment that had matured. They believed that because they had fed and clothed me, which was their legal obligation as parents, I owed them my future. They believed my autonomy was a debt I had to pay off. I looked at the can of tomato soup in my hand. I felt a sudden, violent urge to throw it. I realized then that I wasn't just angry about the $85,000. I was furious that my adulthood was still being treated as negotiable. I was 33 years old, and they still believed they had the right to veto my life choices, to seize my assets, to rewrite my reality. I had been paying for peace my entire life. I had paid with my silence. I had paid with my obedience. I had paid by being the easy child, the one who required no maintenance. And now, when I finally had a chance to build something for myself, they had cashed that in too. I put the soup back on the shelf. I walked out of the store without buying anything. When I got home, I went straight to the evidence folder on my laptop. I read the text message again. Then I took a screenshot. I saved it. I opened the plastic bin of Eloise's letters again. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to remember that not everyone in my family viewed love as a transaction. I shuffled through the papers until I found a birthday card for my 25th birthday. It was a simple card with a picture of a sailboat on the front. I opened it. Eloise's handwriting was shaky. She had been getting frail by then, but the ink was dark and deliberate. My dearest Vivian, happy quarter century. You are becoming such a steady, wonderful woman. But remember, steady does not mean still. You have a fire in you, even if you keep it in the hearth instead of burning down the house. I smiled. She knew me so well. I read the next line. I must have read it 10 times before. But tonight, the words seemed to rearrange themselves into a command. If they try to make you small, don't let them. You are big enough to fill your own life. Don't let them succeed. My hands started to shake. Eloise knew. She had seen it happening even back then. She had seen how they talked over me, how they dismissed my achievements, how they prioritized Marissa's chaos over my stability. She had left me that money not just to buy a house, but to buy my freedom. She knew that as long as I was financially tethered to the family dynamic, I would never truly escape. They had taken the money to keep me small, to keep me in the role of the reliable, silent resource. I closed the card. I placed it on my desk next to the computer. I picked up my phone. I did not reply to the group text. I did not defend myself. I did not apologize for the braces or the car insurance. I dialed Tara Winslow's number. It was late, but I left a voicemail. Hi, Tara. It is Vivian. They responded. They are claiming the theft was repayment for raising me. They are not going to provide the accounting. I paused, looking at the sailboat on the card. I am ready to file the formal demand, I said. And Tara, I want to ask the court for the production of documents. I want to see everything, every check, every transfer, every signature. I hung up. The house was quiet, but for the first time in weeks, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like the deep breath before a shout. I went to the kitchen and looked at the sticky note on the fridge. This is what you agreed to. I pulled it down. I crumpled it into a ball and threw it in the trash. I did not agree to be small, and I was done paying for peace. The automatic doors of North Coast Community Bank slid open with a rush of air that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I walked in with my purse clutched tight against my side. Inside, I had my driver's license, a certified copy of Eloise's will, and a stomach full of acid. I did not go to the teller line. I went straight to the desk with the brass placard that read, New Accounts and Member Services. A woman in a navy blazer was typing furiously on a keyboard. She looked up as I approached, her smile practiced and thin. "Can I help you?" she asked. "My name is Vivian Stewart." I said, "I am here regarding the estate of Eloise Hart." The smile faltered slightly. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Please, have a seat." I sat down. I placed the will on the desk, smoothing out the crease in the center. "I need to see the transaction history for my grandmother's accounts from October 1st through November 5th. I said, specifically, the transfer that closed the savings account ending in 442. The banker, whose name tag read Brenda, picked up the will. She scanned it, her eyes darting back and forth. Then she turned to her computer screen. "I see you are a beneficiary, Ms. Stewart," Brenda said. "However, as I am sure you know, only the executor or an authorized representative can request detailed transaction histories on a closed file. I am a beneficiary of a specific bequest that was in that account." I said, "The money is gone. I need to know who moved it and where it went." Brenda sighed. She had a kind face, tired around the eyes. She lowered her voice. "Ms. Stewart, I cannot give you the printouts. Privacy regulations are very strict. If the account was closed by an authorized party, the bank has fulfilled its obligation." I leaned forward. I was not going to yell. I was going to be the person who refused to leave. "Someone forged my signature to authorize that transfer." I said quietly. Brenda stopped typing. She looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time. "That is a serious accusation," she said. "It is a fact," I replied. "And if I have to subpoena this bank to prove it, I will. But I would prefer if you just looked at the screen and told me if the signature on file matches the one on my license." I slid my license across the desk. Brenda hesitated. Then, against protocol. She clicked a few keys. A window opened on her screen. She looked at the digital image of the document, then down at my license, then back at the screen. Her brow furrowed. "I see," she whispered. "Does it match?" I asked. She did not answer the question directly. She turned her body slightly to shield the screen from the lobby. "Ms. Stewart, I cannot give you this document without a court order," she said. "But I can tell you that the withdrawal was processed in person." "In person?" I asked. "Yes. When your mother brought in the affidavit, she—" Brenda stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth, catching the words too late. "My mother." I repeated. "My mother brought it in." Brenda's face went pale. "I have said too much. You need to speak to the estate administrator. I cannot help you further." She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Thank you." "Brenda," I said, "you have helped more than you know." I walked out of the bank. The wind off the harbor was biting, but I barely felt it. I had confirmation. It was not a faceless clerical error. It was not a misunderstanding. Lila Stewart, my mother, had walked into that bank, looked a teller in the eye, and handed over a document with my faked signature on it. I drove straight to Winslow and Crane. Tara Winslow was eating a salad at her desk when I walked in. She wiped her mouth with a paper napkin and listened as I recounted the conversation. She slipped. I said, "She confirmed my mother brought the affidavit in physically." Tara nodded slowly. "That is good. It establishes custody of the document. It means your mother cannot claim she just mailed something your father gave her without looking at it. She was the courier." "What do we do?" I asked. "We escalate," Tara said. She opened her laptop. "We file a petition for formal accounting and production of documents. We file it in probate court. This is not just a letter between lawyers anymore. This is a public request for the court to compel them to show their work." "Is that aggressive?" I asked. The old instinct to be polite was still twitching in the back of my brain. Tara looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Vivian, they stole $85,000 from you. Filing a form asking them to prove they did not steal it is not aggressive. It is the bare minimum of self-respect. Go ahead." The filing went in on Thursday. By Saturday morning, the reaction arrived. I was in my kitchen. making coffee. When I heard a car door slam, I looked out the window and saw my parents' SUV. My heart hammered against my ribs. I considered pretending I was not home. I considered locking the door and hiding in the bathroom. But that was what the old Vivian would have done. I went to the door and opened it before they could knock. They stood on the porch, holding grocery bags. My mother was wearing a soft beige sweater that made her look harmless. My father was holding a potted plant, a peace lily. "Vivian," my mother exclaimed, her voice thick with exaggerated relief. "We were just in the neighborhood. We thought we would stop by." She pushed past me into the apartment. My father followed, setting the plant down on my small entry table. "I brought you some things from the market," my mother said, bustling into the kitchen as if she had not accused me of threatening the family via text message 4 days ago. "I know you get so busy with work you forget to eat properly. I got those organic apples you like, and I made a batch of stew. It is in the Tupperware." She started unloading the bags onto my counter. Apples, a bag of expensive coffee, a container of beef stew. It was a domestic performance, a reenactment of a happy family Sunday. "Mom," I said. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, my arms crossed. "Why are you here?" My father turned to me. He looked tired. The lines around his mouth were deep. "We want to talk. Vivian," he said, "we want to clear the air. This whole thing has gotten out of hand." I looked at the groceries. This was their strategy. Strategic kindness. They would smother me with affection, remind me of their role as providers, and make me feel like a petulant child for demanding my rights. "We can talk," I said, "but I am not going to apologize." "We do not want an apology," my mother said, closing the refrigerator door. She turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We just want our daughter back. We miss you. Honey, it breaks my heart to have this legal wall between us." "It is not a wall," I said. "It is a request for accounting." My father stepped closer. He put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was heavy. "Vivian, look at me. We are family. We handle things at the dinner table. Not in a courtroom. We want to sit down and explain everything to you. We want to show you the numbers. We want to work out a payment plan for Marissa. We want to make this right." I felt a waver in my chest. This was what I wanted. I wanted them to explain. I wanted to fix it. "All right, show me the numbers." "We will," my father said, smiling. He squeezed my shoulder. "But first, you have to withdraw that filing." The air left the room. "Excuse me," I said. "The filing," he said, his voice dropping to a reasonable, logical pitch. "We cannot talk freely while that threat is hanging over our heads. It is adversarial. If you want us to be open with you, you have to show us that you trust us. Call your lawyer, tell her to withdraw the petition. Then we sit down, open a bottle of wine, and fix this." I looked at his hand on my shoulder. It did not feel like a comfort anymore. It felt like a restraint. They were bargaining with the truth. They were holding the explanation hostage, demanding I disarm myself before they would even admit there was a war. I stepped back, shaking his hand off. "No," I said. My father's smile vanished. "What did you say?" I said no. I repeated, "I am not withdrawing the filing. If you want to show me the numbers, you can show them to the judge, or you can send them to my lawyer today. But I am not taking down the only shield I have just because you brought me stew." My mother slammed her hand onto the counter. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot. "You ungrateful girl," she hissed. Her face transformed, the mask of the doting mother dissolving into pure, red-faced rage. "We come here. We bring you food. We try to be the bigger people. And you spit in our faces." I did not spit, I said, my voice trembling. "I just asked for the truth. The truth is you are selfish," she shouted. "You have always been selfish. You sit here in your quiet apartment with your hoard of money and you judge us. You want to ruin us. Is that it? You want to humiliate your father in public. I want my inheritance." I said, "Come on, Lila," my father said. He grabbed my mother's arm. "We are leaving. There is no reasoning with her. She has been poisoned." He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only a cold, transactional calculation. Do not expect another visit. Vivian, you made your choice. They stormed out. My mother left the grocery bags on the counter. I locked the door behind them. I slid down to the floor and sat with my back against the wood, listening to their car engine roar to life and fade away. I looked at the bag of apples. I felt sick that night. My phone rang at 11:30. It was Marissa. I hesitated, then answered. Viv. Her voice was small, shaky. It sounded like she was crying. Marissa, I said, are you okay? I do not know, she said. Mom and Dad are going crazy. They are screaming at each other downstairs. Mom is throwing things. They said you are suing us. I am not suing you. I said, sitting up in bed, I am asking for the records. Marissa, I need to know where the money went. There was a silence on the line, then a sniffle. I spent it. Viv, she whispered. I know you spent it, I said gently. But $85,000 in 2 months. Marissa, that is a lot of money. It wasn't just rent, she said. Her voice dropped so low I could barely hear her. I bought a house. I froze. A house. It is a fixer-upper, she said quickly. In Boston, a duplex. The plan was to live in one unit and rent out the other. It was supposed to be the business plan. Mom and Dad said it was a brilliant investment. They said it would set me up for life. They used the money for the down payment. I closed my eyes. They had taken my house fund to buy Marissa a house. Okay, I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. So the house is in your name. There was a long pause. Marissa. It is complicated, she said, because my credit was bad from the studio. The bank wouldn't approve the mortgage just on me, so Mom and Dad co-signed. Okay, I said, that is normal. And, for paperwork reasons, their names are on the deed too, she said, just until I refinance. That is what they said. They said it was safer that way. I sat in the dark, the phone pressed to my ear. Marissa, I said, do you realize what they did? They did not just give you money. They took my inheritance, used it to buy an asset, and put their own names on the title. They used my money to buy themselves a rental property in Boston. No, she said, her voice rising in panic. No, they are just helping me. You are twisting it. I am reading the map. Marissa, I said, I cannot talk. She said, I wanted you to know I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted a fresh start. She hung up. I stared at the phone. The pieces were locking together. It wasn't just a rescue mission for the Golden Child. It was a portfolio expansion for Gordon and Lila Stewart. The next day, I went back to Winslow and Crane. Tara had news. I pulled the preliminary tax holding reports for the estate. Tara said, we found something else. What I asked. I felt numb. I did not think anything could surprise me anymore. Eloise did not just have the savings account. Tara said she had a small investment account, a mutual fund she started in the 90s. It was linked to the main savings account for overdraft protection, which is why it did not show up as a separate line item immediately. And I asked, and it grew. Tara said, the market has been good. When the account was liquidated on November 2nd, the total transfer was not $85,000. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was $112,000. I stared at the number. $112,000. They had taken it all, every cent, and they had lied about the amount, even when they were admitting to the theft. That evening, I did something I never thought I would do. I went to a community center basement for a legal clinic hosted by the Harbor Ridge Elder Justice Project. I sat in a folding chair in the back. The room was filled with people holding folders, looking tired and anxious. When it was my turn, I sat across from an older woman named Mrs. Higgins. She was a retired probate judge with white hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed. I told her the story. I told her about the forgery, the house in Boston, the peace lily, the stew. Mrs. Higgins listened. She nodded. She did not look shocked. You feel like you are the crazy one. Do not you? She asked. Her voice was raspy, like dry leaves. Yes, I said. I feel like I'm destroying my family over paper. You are not destroying anything, she said. The destruction happened when they signed your name. You are just turning on the lights. She leaned forward and tapped the table with a manicured finger. Listen to me, honey. Families do this all the time. I spent 30 years on the bench. I saw parents steal from children. Children steal from parents. Siblings steal from each other. And they always use the same weapon. What weapon, I asked? Shame, she said. They use your shared history, your love, your fear of being the bad guy. Shame is their lock. It keeps you quiet. It keeps you from filing the motions. It keeps you from asking the questions. She pointed to the folder in my lap. But paper is your key. Paper does not care about Christmas dinner. Paper does not care if your mother cries. Paper only cares about what is true. Keep collecting the paper. I drove home feeling a strange sense of clarity. Shame is the lock. Paper is the key. But the lock was holding strong in Harbor Ridge. 2 days later, I ran into my Aunt Carol at the gas station. Carol is my father's sister, a woman who communicates primarily through gossip and passive-aggressive Facebook posts. She was pumping gas into her sedan. When she saw me, her face tightened. Hello, Vivian, she said. Hi, Aunt Carol, I said. I heard about what you are doing to your parents, she said, not looking at me. She kept her eyes on the pump numbers. What did you hear, I asked. That you are suing them because you did not get enough money, she said. That you are trying to bankrupt them out of spite. Honestly, Vivian, I always thought you were the sensible one. But greedy. That is an ugly look. Greedy. The word hit me like a physical slap. I was driving a 10-year-old car. I was wearing a coat I had bought at an outlet store 3 years ago. My parents were co-owners of a duplex in Boston purchased with stolen funds. But in the story being told around town, I was the villain. I wanted to explain. I wanted to pull out the files and show her the forgery. But I looked at her set jaw, her narrowed eyes. She had already picked her side. The story was easier to believe than the truth. The story was that the Stewarts were a good family and Vivian was the ungrateful daughter. I am not greedy. Carol. I said, I just want what Grandma left me, Carol scoffed. Eloise would be ashamed of you dragging the family name through the mud. She put the nozzle back in the pump and got in her car without looking at me again. I stood there, smelling the gasoline fumes. It hurt. It hurt more than I expected. I had always prided myself on my reputation. I was the good one. Now I was the pariah. But Mrs. Higgins' voice echoed in my head. Paper does not care. I got a call from Tara the next afternoon. Vivian, I need you to check something for me, she said. Her voice was sharp, energized. What is it? We finally got a partial production from the bank. She said, they sent over the copy of the withdrawal slip for the initial transfer from the savings account, the one that moved the bulk of the cash before the account was closed. Okay, I said. It is dated October 15th, Tara said, and it has your signature on it. October 15th. I repeated. I need you to check your calendar, Tara said. Where were you on October 15th? I pulled up my work calendar on my laptop. I scrolled back to October. I stared at the block of dates marked in blue. I was not in Harbor Ridge. I said, where were you? I was in Portland. I said, I was at the Northeast Logistics and Supply Chain Conference. I was there for 3 days, October 14th through the 16th. Can you prove it? Tara asked. I opened my expense folder. I have the hotel receipt. I said, I have the badge scan from the conference center. I have a credit card charge for dinner at a seafood restaurant in the Old Port at 7 o'clock on the 15th. Tara let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. That is it, she said. That is the nail in the coffin. You cannot sign a withdrawal slip in Harbor Ridge while you are eating clam chowder in Portland. I looked at the dates on my screen. They had been so sloppy. They had been so arrogant. They had assumed I would never check. They had assumed I would never hire a lawyer. They had assumed that the shame would work, and it almost had. But now I had the paper. I realized then that this was not just a fight about money anymore. It was not even a fight about the house. It was a test. It was a test of whether my family could rewrite reality and force me to live in their fiction. They wanted me to accept a world where stealing was borrowing, where lies were protection, and where victims were villains. I closed my laptop. I was done arguing feelings. I was done trying to make them understand my hurt. I was done trying to be the good daughter. From this moment on, I would be a machine. I would be a scanner. I would be a recorder. I picked up the phone and called Tara back. File the motion for the full forensic accounting. I said, and Tara add the investment account to the claim. We are going for everything. Discovery is a clinical word for a violent process. In the legal world, it means the exchange of information, the production of documents, the laying of cards upon the table. But for me, sitting at my dining table under the hum of the refrigerator, discovery felt like an autopsy. The boxes had arrived from Winslow and Crane that afternoon. Tara had been relentless. Her motion for accounting had cracked the seal, and while my parents had not yet surrendered everything, the bank records were starting to flow. I opened the first file. It was a transaction log for the joint account my parents shared with Eloise, the account that was supposed to be for her care, but which they had maintained access to even after she entered the hospice facility. I had expected to see a single, large transfer to Marissa. That was the story they had told. We helped your sister. It was a one-time thing. I ran my finger down the column of withdrawals. October 2nd, $500 to a luxury car dealership. October 4th, $1,200 to a credit card company. October 10th, $300 to a high-end steakhouse in Portland. I frowned. Marissa did not drive a luxury car. Marissa did not pay her credit cards on time. That was her defining trait. And Marissa certainly did not eat $300 dinners alone. I turned the page. October 12th. A check written to the Pine County tax collector for $4,000. October 15th. The day I was in Portland at the conference, a withdrawal of $7,000 cash. The dates did not line up with Marissa's story about the house down payment. The amounts did not line up with a business loan. These were not investments. These were bills. I went to my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. I started entering the numbers, categorizing them based on the merchant codes: lifestyle, debt maintenance, tax arrears. By the time I finished entering the data from the first month alone, a picture was forming that had nothing to do with my sister. My parents were not Robin Hood. Stealing from the rich sister to give to the poor sister, they were just drowning. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. I thought about their house, the big colonial on the hill. I thought about the new SUV my father leased every 3 years. I thought about the country club membership they refused to give up, even though my father complained about the greens fees constantly. They were bleeding money, and Eloise's account had been the tourniquet. I stood up and walked to the closet in the hallway. 2 months ago, my mother had come over in a frenzy of cleaning energy, claiming she was purging the attic and wanted to give me some of my old school papers. She had left 3 plastic bins, which I had shoved into the closet and ignored. I pulled the top bin down. It was labeled Vivian, high school/miscellaneous in my mother's handwriting. I opened it. It was mostly what she said it was: old report cards, a participation trophy for track and field, a stack of yearbooks. But at the bottom, beneath a layer of old art projects, there was a manila folder that did not look like it belonged to me. It was labeled Household, 2024. My mother must have scooped it up by mistake when she was clearing off a desk. I opened it. The first paper was a final notice from the electric company. The second paper was a letter from a collection agency regarding a credit card in my father's name. The third paper made my breath catch in my throat. It was a notice of intent to lien from the town of Harbor Ridge, unpaid property taxes for 2 years running. I held the paper up to the light. The date was from 6 months before Eloise died. They had been underwater for years. The realization hit me with a complicated kind of grief. I had spent my entire life feeling inadequate because I could not match their shine. I drove a sensible car. They drove a status symbol. I lived in a rental. They lived in a manor. I saved. They spent. I had always thought they looked down on me because I was boring. Now I realized they looked down on me because I was a reminder of what they were pretending to be. I was solvent. They were a hollow shell painted gold. The theft wasn't just about favoring Marissa. It was about fear. They were terrified of losing their standing in Harbor Ridge. They were terrified that if the facade cracked, the town would see them for what they were. My inheritance had not been taken to build Marissa's future. It had been taken to patch the holes in their own present. I put the lien notice in my evidence folder. The next day, I called Marissa. "We need to meet." I said. She sounded wary. "Talk to Dad." He said, "I'm not supposed to talk to you." "I am not talking to Dad." I said, "I am talking to you. Meet me at the coffee shop near the pier. 30 minutes. If you do not come, I'm going to email you a PDF that I think you will find very interesting." She came. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf wrapped twice around her neck, as if she were trying to hide. She ordered a latte and sat down across from me, keeping her coat on. "Make it quick. Viv," she said, "I have a contractor coming at 2. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It was a summary I had created from the bank records. "What is this?" she asked. "Look at the column on the left." I said, "That is the total amount withdrawn from Grandma's accounts in the month after she died. Look at the column on the right. That is the amount you told me you received for the house." Marissa looked. She squinted. "The total withdrawn is $112,000. I said, "How much did you get?" Marissa. She hesitated. 40? She said, $40,000. I repeated, "Yeah, for the down payment and some repairs." I pointed to the paper. "Where is the other $72,000? Marissa. She stared at the numbers. "I do not know," she said. "Dad said there were administrative costs, taxes, legal fees." I slid the transaction log across the table. "Here are the fees," I said. $4,000 to the tax collector for their house, $1,200 to Dad's Visa card, $500 to the Lexus dealership. Marissa picked up the paper. Her hand was shaking. "They told me you were set," she whispered. "They told me you had plenty of money and you were just being stingy. They said you did not need the inheritance because you have the pension and the savings. They said I needed a leg up." I looked at my sister. She was 31 years old, but in that moment, she looked 12. She had built her entire identity around being the one who needed help, the one who was a mess, the one who needed saving, and they had fed that insecurity. They had used her neediness as a cover for their own greed. "Marissa," I said gently, "they used you. They took the money to pay their own debts, and they gave you a slice of it so they could say it was for family. They made you the face of the theft so they could stay hidden." She dropped the paper. Tears slipped out from under her sunglasses. "That is not true," she said. "They love me. They are helping me with the house. Let us talk about the house," I said. I pulled out the property record Tara had pulled that morning. I saw the deed. "Marissa, I saw that their names are on it. Just temporarily," she said quickly, "because of my credit." "Marissa, look at the structure." I said, "It is a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Do you know what that means?" She shook her head. "It means they own the house as much as you do." I said, "It means if you sell it, they get half the profit. It means if you refinance, they have to sign off. They did not give you a house. They used my money to buy themselves an investment property, and they let you live in it as a property manager." She sat back, stunned. "But Dad said it was for my security. It is for their security." I said, "They are broke. Marissa, they have liens. They have debt. This house is the only asset they have that isn't already leveraged to the hilt." She looked out the window at the gray water of the harbor. She took a long, shaky breath. "I did not know." She said, "I swear. Viv, I did not know about the credit cards or the liens. I thought they were being parents." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "I know." I said, "But now you know the truth, and you have to decide which story you are going to live in. The one where you are the villain who stole my money, or the one where you help me fix this." She pulled her hand away. "I cannot go against them. Viv, They are all I have. You have your job and your perfect credit score. I have them. You have me. I said. She stood up. She gathered her purse. I have to go, she said. I have to go meet the contractor. She practically ran out of the shop, but she took the paper with her. 2 days later, Tara called me into her office. We have leverage, she said. She placed a thick document on her desk. I dug into the probate filings from the original application. She said, when your father applied to be the personal representative, he had to post a bond. A bond, I asked. An insurance bond, she explained. It is a policy that protects the beneficiaries against misconduct by the executor. Usually, for a family estate this size, the will waives the bond requirement. But Eloise's will was older, from before the laws changed, and it did not explicitly waive it. Your father had to purchase a corporate surety bond to get the letters of administration. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means there is an insurance company on the hook, Tara said, a small, predatory smile playing on her lips. If we prove fraud or misappropriation, the insurance company has to pay you. They have to make the estate whole. That sounds too easy. I said, here's the catch, she said. Once the insurance company pays you, they go after your father to get their money back, and insurance companies are not like daughters. They do not accept emotional blackmail. They do not care about family dinners. They seize assets. They garnish wages. They foreclose on homes. I felt a chill. If I triggered the bond, I would be unleashing a corporate shark on my parents. They would lose everything: the house, the cars, the reputation. It would be total annihilation. I do not want to destroy them, I said. I just want my money back. Then we use the bond as the threat. Tara said, we draft a settlement agreement. We tell them, sign this, pay Vivian back over time, remove themselves from Marissa's deed, and we keep the insurance company out of it. If they refuse, we file the claim against the bond, draw it up. I said. The settlement agreement was 5 pages long. It was dry, factual, and incredibly fair. It proposed a repayment plan of $500 a month, a manageable sum. It required them to sign a quitclaim deed removing their names from Marissa's house. Leaving her as the sole owner, it required a full accounting of the remaining funds, and it required a written acknowledgement that the funds had been improperly distributed. It was an off-ramp. It was a way for them to save face, keep their house, and keep the secret. I asked for a meeting. My parents refused to come to my apartment. They refused to go to Tara's office. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, a conference room at the public library. When I walked in, they were already seated. My father was wearing a suit, as if he were attending a board meeting. My mother was wearing sunglasses. Though we were indoors, I sat down. I did not make small talk. I slid the settlement agreement across the table. This is a way out, I said. My father picked up the document. He put on his reading glasses. He read it in silence. My mother stared at the wall, her jaw set. After 5 minutes, my father threw the document back on the table. It made a sharp slap sound. Absolutely not, he said. I looked at him. Dad. Read the terms. It is $500 a month. You can afford that. It protects you from a lawsuit. It keeps this private. I am not signing this, he said. Why? I asked. Because of paragraph 4. He said. He stabbed his finger at the paper. Acknowledgement of improper distribution. You want me to sign a paper saying I stole from my own mother. You did. I said. I managed the estate, he shouted. His voice echoed in the small room. I made executive decisions. I am not putting my name on a confession for your ego. Vivian, that is what this is. You want a trophy. You want to frame this and hang it on your wall to prove you were right and we were wrong. It is not about ego. I said, it is about the bond. He stopped. What bond? The surety bond you purchased from Liberty Mutual when you opened the estate. I said. His face went gray. He knew. He remembered. If we go to court, I said, I will file a claim against the bond. The insurance company will pay me. And then they will come for you. And they will take the house. They will take the pension. They will take everything. This settlement is me trying to save you from that." My mother stood up. She was trembling. "You are bluffing," she spat. "You would not do that. You would not make your parents homeless. You are not that cruel. I am not the one who forged a signature." "Mom," I said. She grabbed her purse. "We are leaving. We are not signing this. You want to sue us? Go ahead. No judge in this county will side with a greedy daughter against her grieving parents. Everyone knows who we are. Everyone knows we are good people." "Dad," I said, looking at him, "think about the bond." He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and pity. "You really think you can win?" "Do not you," he said. "You think the world runs on spreadsheets. You are going to learn a hard lesson. Vivian, family is not a contract." They walked out. I sat in the empty conference room. The settlement agreement lay on the table. Unsigned. They had chosen the cliff. They were so blinded by their own narrative, the story, where they were the noble patriarch and matriarch. And I was the ungrateful child that they would rather risk total destruction than sign a piece of paper admitting they had made a mistake. It was not about the money anymore. It was about the confession. They could not survive the ego death of admitting they were flawed. I picked up the document and put it back in my bag. I walked out of the library. The air was crisp and cold. That night, for the first time in 2 months, I slept through the night. I woke up at 7 in the morning, feeling a strange sensation. It took me a moment to identify it. It was relief. For weeks, I had been carrying a heavy, dull ache in my chest, the hope that they would fix it. I had been bargaining. If I just explain it well enough, they will understand. If I just show them the math, they will apologize. But now I knew. They would never apologize. They would never understand. They were incapable of seeing me as anything other than an adversary. The hope was gone. And with the hope went the anxiety. I made a pot of coffee. I sat by the window and watched the sun come up over the rooftops of Harbor Ridge. I was done bargaining with denial. I was done trying to manage their emotions. I was done trying to save them from the consequences of their own actions. I picked up my phone and called Tara. They refused. I said, "I thought they might." Tara said, "Pride is a powerful drug. What is the next step?" I asked. "We file the pretrial brief," she said, "and we subpoena the insurance company. We put the bond in play." "Do it," I said. There was a pause on the line. "Are you sure?" Vivian Tara asked. "Once we ring this bell, we cannot unring it." I took a sip of coffee. It was hot and bitter and perfect. "I am sure," I said. I hung up. I went to my closet and pulled out a suit. It was a dark gray wool suit I usually saved for annual reviews at work. I brushed the lint off the shoulder. I was going to wear it to court. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. My skin was pale, but my eyes were clear. For 33 years, I had been the daughter who didn't make a scene. I had been the daughter who smoothed things over. I had been the daughter who absorbed the impact. That daughter was gone. In her place was a woman who held a folder full of paper. A woman who knew that the truth was not a negotiation. I went to my desk and opened the evidence folder one last time. I looked at the lien notice. I looked at the bank transfer logs. I looked at the forged signature. I printed them all out. 3 copies, one for the judge, one for the defense, and one for me. I placed them in a binder. I snapped the rings shut. The sound was loud and final. I was ready. The weeks leading up to the hearing were defined by a silence that felt heavy and pressurized, like the air before a summer thunderstorm. I went to work. I tracked shipments. I came home. I stared at the binder of evidence on my dining table. My parents had gone quiet. There were no more peace lilies, no more stew, no more texts accusing me of betrayal. They had retreated behind a wall of wounded pride, likely convincing themselves and anyone who would listen that I was a vindictive child tantruming over an administrative error. It was a Tuesday night when the knock came. It was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that turned the streets of Harbor Ridge into slick mirrors. I expected it to be a neighbor, or perhaps a delivery I had forgotten. But when I opened the door, Marissa was standing there. She looked wrecked. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, and she was clutching a plastic grocery bag against her chest as if it contained the crown jewels. She was not wearing her usual armor of sunglasses and bright lipstick. She looked pale and young. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper over the sound of the rain. I stepped back. "Come in." She walked into my living room, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. She did not take off her coat. She walked straight to the coffee table and upended the plastic bag. A cascade of crumpled papers fell out. Bank statements, printouts from a mortgage portal, scribbled notes on the back of envelopes. "I think they lied to both of us," she said. Her hands were trembling so violently that she could barely separate the pages. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. I brought them back and sat down on the sofa opposite her. "Tell me," I said. Marissa took a deep breath. She picked up a sheet of paper that looked like a screenshot from an online banking portal. "After we talked at the coffee shop, I started looking," she said. Really looking. "You showed me that they took $112,000, but I only got 40. So I went through my emails. I went through the texts. I tried to match up the dates." She slid the paper toward me. "This is a transfer receipt I found in my old inbox." She said, "Mom sent it to me to prove she had wired the money for the contractor. Look at the date." I looked. "November 4th. "Okay," I said. "Now look at this," she said, sliding a second paper over. "This is a statement I found in Dad's home office. I still have a key. I went over there when they were at church on Sunday. I felt like a criminal. Viv. But I had to know." I looked at the statement. It was a credit card bill for a card I did not know existed. The balance was staggering. $32,000. "Look at the payment." Marissa pointed. On November 4th, the same day she wired money to Marissa, there was a payment of $25,000 to the credit card. "They did not take the money to help me," Marissa said. Her voice broke. "They took the money to pay off the Platinum Visa. And look at the other one." She pushed a third document forward. It was a letter from a private lending company. "This is a bridge loan," she said. "They took out a short-term, high-interest loan last year to cover the mortgage on the big house. It came due in November." I looked at the amount. $45,000. "They used Grandma's money to pay off the bridge loan." Marissa said, "They used it to keep the house. They used it to pay the credit card. And they gave me the leftovers so they could tell everyone they were helping their struggling daughter." She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and wide with shock. I was the cover story. Viv. They made me the excuse. They told me I was the one who needed saving, but they were the ones drowning. I sat back. The anger I had been carrying for weeks shifted into something else. It was a cold, hollow sadness. They had used Marissa's reputation against her. They knew she was impulsive. They knew she had financial trouble. So they used her as a human shield. If anyone asked where the inheritance went, they could point to Marissa and say, "We did it for her." And because Marissa believed she was a mess, she accepted the narrative. "I am so sorry." "Marissa," I said. She buried her face in her hands. "I defended them. I told you that you were being selfish. I told you that you were cold. And the whole time, they were using me to hide their own debt." I reached out and put a hand on her knee. "You did not know. I should have known," she said, looking up. "I should have asked questions. But I liked the lie. Viv, I liked thinking they were these powerful, generous parents who could fix everything. I didn't want to see that they were just as messed up as I am." We sat there for a long time, the only sound the rain drumming against the window pane. Finally, Marissa wiped her face. "What do we do?" she asked. "We tell the truth." I said. The next day, my mother called. I was at my desk at work, staring at a spreadsheet of lobster yields. When my phone buzzed, I debated letting it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Hello," I said. "Vivian." Her voice was wet and thick. She had been crying. "Hi, Mom. I do not understand why you are doing this," she said. She did not sound angry anymore. She sounded small, defeated. "I am not doing anything. Mom," I said, I am just asking for the records. You are punishing us. She wept. That is what this is. You are punishing us for not being perfect. You have always been so hard on us. Vivian. So judgmental. I am not judging you. I said, you do not know what it is like. She cried, her voice rising in a sudden, desperate wail. You do not know what it is like to lie awake at night wondering if you are going to lose your home. You do not know the fear. Vivian, I grew up with nothing. You know that my father was a fisherman who drank half his paycheck. I swore I would never live like that again. I swore my children would never see me sweat over a bill. I listened to her sob. It was a performance, but it was also real. She was terrified of poverty. She was terrified of being seen as less than. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. I understand fear, but fear does not give you the right to forge my signature. Oh, the signature, she scoffed. The sadness instantly replaced by dismissal. It was a piece of paper. Vivian. It was a formality. Why do you care more about ink on a page than you care about your mother's dignity? Because the ink on that page stole my future. I said, I was trying to protect the family, she screamed, and I hung up. I sat there, my hand gripping the phone. I realized then that the conversation would never change. She would always pivot back to her feelings. Her fear justified her actions. Her intent mattered more than the impact. She was using her emotions to erase the facts. She wanted me to feel so guilty about her childhood trauma that I would let her rob me in the present. I was not going to let that happen. I left work early and went to Winslow and Crane. Tara looked grim. She had a file open on her desk. We need to talk about the hearing. She said, okay. I said, I need you to understand what happens if we win. She said, if the judge looks at this evidence, the forgery, the bank records, the commingling of funds, he is going to see more than just mismanagement. He is going to see fraud. I nodded. I know. Do you? Tara asked. She took off her glasses. In Maine, if a probate judge suspects criminal conduct, they have a mandatory reporting obligation. They can refer the case to the district attorney. I went cold. The district attorney. Yes, Tara said. If that happens, this stops being a civil dispute about money. It becomes a criminal investigation. Forgery is a felony. Theft by deception is a felony. Your parents could face probation, fines, or even jail time. I stared at her. Jail time. I pictured my father in a jumpsuit. I pictured my mother in a cell. The image was absurd, impossible, and terrifying. I do not want them in jail. I said, then you need to know that is a risk. Tara said, once we walk into that courtroom and hand the judge the proof that she signed your name, the ball is out of your hands. The court system is a machine. It does not care that they are your parents. It only cares that a crime was committed. I sat in silence. The weight of it pressed down on me. I wanted my money back. I wanted accountability. But did I want to be the reason my parents went to prison? Tara watched me. This is why we try to settle, she said softly, to keep the machine turned off. I went home and sat at my computer. I opened a blank document. I needed to write the paper I had promised myself I would give them. I did not write it like a lawyer. I wrote it like a daughter who was done being gaslit. I drafted a new settlement agreement. It was simple. Section 1 acknowledgement. They had to admit that the funds were taken without my consent. Section 2. Restitution. They had to repay the full amount of $112,000 on a payment schedule of $500 a month. I knew it would take years. I knew they would probably die before it was paid off. But the amount mattered. The debt had to be real. Section 3. The house. They had to sign a quitclaim deed immediately, removing their names from the Boston property and leaving Marissa as the sole owner. Section 4. The bond. If they signed this, I would agree not to file a claim against the insurance bond, and I would request that the court seal the record, preventing the evidence of forgery from becoming a public scandal. It was a mercy. It was an exit ramp. I printed it out. It was 3 pages long. That evening, I drove to my therapy appointment. I had started going a month ago, when the insomnia was at its worst. My therapist. A woman named Dr. Evans listened as I explained the settlement. "You are offering them a lot of grace," she said. "I am not doing it for them." I said, "I am doing it for me. I do not want to carry the guilt of destroying them. I just want to carry the truth." "But what if they do not sign?" she asked. "Then I file the papers." I said, "And whatever happens, happens," on the drive home. I felt a wave of panic. I pulled over to the side of the road, overlooking the dark water of the harbor. My heart was racing. I felt like a traitor. I felt like the bad daughter. I took out my phone. I opened the voice memo app. I needed to hear myself say it. I needed to know that my voice was real. I hit record. I am not the bad guy. I said to the empty car, I am not the villain. I took a breath. I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad, but I cannot let you hurt me anymore. I paused. I can love you and still hold you accountable. Those two things can exist at the same time. I do not have to set myself on fire just to keep you warm. I stopped the recording. I played it back. My voice sounded shaky at first, then stronger at the end. I can love you and still hold you accountable. I saved the file. I named it Baseline. When I got home, Marissa was waiting in the lobby of my building. She had a scarf wrapped around her head, looking like a spy from a bad movie. "Did you write it?" she asked. I nodded. I held up the folder. "I talked to them," she said. She looked nervous. I told them I saw the records. I told them I knew about the credit card and the bridge loan. "What did they say?" I asked. "They denied it at first," she said. "Then Mom cried. Then Dad got quiet. They are scared. Viv, they know the hearing is in 2 days. They know you have the evidence. Will they sign?" I asked. Marissa took a breath. She looked at me with a seriousness I had never seen in her before. "I told them I would sign a statement," she said. "What statement?" I told them I would sign an affidavit for the court, confirming that the down payment money came from the estate and that I did not know it was yours. And I told them I would consent to removing their names from the deed. I looked at her. That was huge. That was her choosing sides. "But," she said, holding up a finger, "I have a condition." "What is it?" "I will only do it if you promise not to destroy them," she said. "If they sign your paper, if they agree to the payment plan, you have to let it go. You cannot post about it on Facebook. You cannot tell Aunt Carol the details. You cannot ruin their reputation in town. They are old. Viv, this image is all they have left." I looked at my sister. She was protecting them, but she was also protecting me. She knew that if I burned their reputation to the ground, I would be the one standing in the ashes. "I do not want revenge. Marissa," I said, "I just want reality." "So we have a deal?" she asked. "If they sign." I said, "I will keep it quiet." She nodded. "Give me the paper. I will take it to them." I handed her the folder. She took it, hugged me briefly, and walked out into the night. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. The apartment felt too quiet. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than usual. I paced the living room. I rearranged the throw pillows. I watered my plants. Even though I had just watered them 2 days ago, I needed something to do with my hands. I walked into the kitchen. I decided to bake. Eloise used to bake when she was anxious. She said the precision of measuring flour and sugar calmed the mind. I reached for her old cookbook, a battered copy of The Joy of Cooking that she had given me a few years before she died. The spine was broken, and the pages were stained with vanilla and butter. I opened it to the section on cookies. As I turned the page, something fluttered out. It was not a recipe card. It was a folded piece of stationery, the kind Eloise used to write her correspondence. I picked it up. It was dated 5 years ago. "Vivian, I am hiding this here because I know you are the only one who will ever open this book. Your mother thinks cooking is a chore, and Marissa thinks it is a mystery." I smiled. She was right. I continued reading. "I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. Years ago, when your grandfather died, there was some money from his life insurance. It was not a fortune, but it was enough. I intended to put it into a trust for you girls. Your father came to me. He said he was in trouble with a business deal. He asked to borrow it. He swore he would pay it back in 6 months. I gave it to him. I never saw a penny of it again. When I asked, he told me I was confused. He told me I'd given it to him as a gift. He made me feel like my memory was failing. I am telling you this because I worry history will repeat itself. They are not bad people, Vivian, but they are weak people, and weak people will always justify taking from strong people because they think the strong can handle the loss. If money disappears when I'm gone, do not let them tell you that you are confused. Trust your instincts. You are the strong one. Love, Grandma. I lowered the letter. My hands were shaking. She had known. She had lived it. They had gaslit her just like they were gaslighting me. They had taken her husband's insurance money and convinced her she was senile to cover their tracks. It was a pattern. It was a generational curse of entitlement and theft. But reading the words, "You are the strong one," felt like a jolt of electricity. She did not leave me the money just to buy a house. She left me the money and the warning because she knew I was the only one who could stop the cycle. She knew I was the only one who would stand up and say no. I folded the letter and placed it in my pocket. It was not a magic solution. It did not change the law or the bank records, but it was fuel. I was not crazy. I was not greedy. I was the one Eloise had trusted to break the chain. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. I turned off the kitchen light. I did not bake the cookies. I did not need to distract myself anymore. I went to my bedroom and laid out my clothes for the morning, the gray suit, the sensible shoes. I placed the binder of evidence on the chair by the door. Tomorrow, we would go to court. Tomorrow, I would find out if my parents loved their pride more than they loved their daughter. I closed my eyes. I pictured Eloise standing in her kitchen, flour on her apron, smiling at me. Trust your instincts. The Pine County Courthouse is a building designed to make you feel small. It is constructed of gray granite and red brick, with high ceilings that trap the sound of footsteps and turn them into echoes. The air inside always smells of floor wax and stale anxiety. I arrived at 8 a.m. Tara walked beside me, her heels clicking a sharp, steady rhythm on the marble floor. I carried the binder. It was a black, 3-ring binder, 3 inches thick, containing every bank statement, every email, every text message, and the original copy of the forged waiver. It was heavy, but the weight felt grounding. It was the physical manifestation of my reality. My parents arrived 10 minutes later. I watched them come through the security checkpoint. My father was wearing his navy blazer with the gold buttons, the one he usually reserved for Easter Sunday and yacht club dinners. My mother was wearing a cream-colored dress and a pearl necklace. They were holding hands. As they stepped into the lobby, they spotted me. Most people, when facing their daughter in a legal battle over fraud, would look somber. They might look angry. They might look ashamed. My parents smiled. It was a wide, bright, terrifying smile. It was the smile they wore in Christmas cards. It was the smile they wore when they were telling a story at a dinner party that was only mostly true. It was a performance. They were walking into a courtroom, but they were acting as if they were walking into a brunch. They believed, down to their marrow, that if they just looked the part of the respectable, loving parents, the world would bend to accommodate them. They thought this was theater. They did not see the binder in my hands. They only saw the audience. I stood by the wooden benches outside courtroom 4, waiting for the clerk to unlock the doors. Marissa was standing a few feet away from me, staring at her shoes. She looked pale, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She had not looked at our parents since they arrived. My mother disengaged from my father's arm and walked over to me. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace, her perfume a heavy floral scent arriving a second before she did. "Vivian," she said. Her voice was low, intimate, the tone she used when she was sharing a secret. "You look tired. Honey, are you sleeping?" "I am sleeping fine." "Mom," I said. I did not step back. I held my ground. She reached out and brushed a piece of invisible lint off my shoulder. "We can still stop this," she whispered. "Dad and I are willing to forgive the outburst. We can just go in there and tell the judge we have reached a private understanding. We can go get lunch. Just the four of us, like old times. I looked at her. I looked at the pearls around her neck. I wondered if they were real, or if they were another part of the facade, like the lease on the Lexus or the equity in the house. There is no understanding. "Mom," I said, "there is only the accounting." Her smile faltered. The corners of her mouth twitched. Her fingers tightened on my sleeve. Digging into the wool of my blazer, "If you do this—" "Vivian," she hissed, her voice dropping to a register of pure venom, "you will lose us. You will never be welcome in our home again. You will be an orphan. Do you understand? I felt a cold wind blow through my chest. For years. That threat would have brought me to my knees. The fear of being cast out, of being the unlovable one, had ruled my life. But as I looked at her, at the panic in her eyes that she was trying to mask as anger, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of losing them. I was afraid of becoming them. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I already lost you," I said. She blinked, startled by the calmness of my voice. "I lost you the day you signed my name," I said. "I am not doing this to lose you. Mom, I am just filing the paperwork." The bailiff opened the double doors. "All rise," he bellowed. We filed into the courtroom. It was a small room, wood-paneled and serious. The judge's bench sat high on a raised platform. My parents walked to the defense table on the right. They sat down and arranged themselves, smoothing their clothes, projecting an air of confused innocence. Their lawyer, a man I recognized from town named Mr. Henderson, looked less confident. He had seen the pre-trial motions. He knew about the bond. I sat at the plaintiff's table on the left with Tara. I placed the binder in front of me. Marissa stood in the aisle for a moment. My mother patted the empty chair next to her. A gesture of command. "Sit here. Be on our side." Marissa looked at the chair. Then she looked at me. She walked to the row of benches behind the plaintiff's table my side and sat down directly behind me. The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. It was louder than a scream. I saw my father's head snap around. He looked at Marissa, and for the first time, the smile dropped. His face hardened into a mask of stone. It was a look I hadn't seen since I was 7 years old. The day I dropped a carton of milk and ruined his shoes. It was the look of a man who realized he was losing control of his property. Judge Holloway entered. He was a man in his 60s with a shaved head and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He did not look like a man who enjoyed theater. He looked like a man who wanted lunch. He sat down and opened the file. Estate of Eloise Hart. He read, "Petition for formal accounting and restitution." He looked over his glasses at the room. "I have read the briefs," he said. His voice was dry. "This should be straightforward. The petitioner is alleging that specific funds bequeathed to her were misappropriated by the executors. The executors claim the funds were used for legitimate estate purposes and family necessities." He turned his gaze to my parents. "Mr. Stewart," he said, "you are the personal representative." My father stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward. "The court is asking for the simplest thing in the world. Mr. Stewart, a clear accounting. The will stated that $85,000 was to be distributed to Vivian Stewart. The bank records show the account is empty. Where did the money go?" My father cleared his throat. He buttoned his jacket. He put on his most reasonable, authoritative voice. "Your Honor," he began, "the administration of an estate is a complex matter. There were expenses. There were debts. We made a decision, as a family, to reallocate those resources to areas of critical need." What areas, the judge asked. My father gestured vaguely toward Marissa. "We had to assist our younger daughter with a housing crisis. It was an emergency. We believed, in good faith, that keeping the family solvent was what my mother would have wanted." The judge looked at the paper in front of him. "You say you gave the money to Marissa Stewart for a house?" "Yes, Your Honor." My father said, "How much?" My father paused. He looked at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson looked at the ceiling. "It was a significant portion." My father said, "I need a number." "Mr. Stewart," the judge said, "did you transfer $85,000 to Marissa Stewart?" "Well, not in a single lump sum." my father said, his voice gaining a slight edge of defensiveness. There were taxes, there were fees, and there were reimbursements for care we provided to my mother in her final years. Reimbursements, the judge repeated. Were these reimbursements documented? Did you submit a claim to the court for these services? We are family, Your Honor, my father exclaimed, throwing his hands up. We do not invoice each other for love. We took care of her. We used the money to settle the debts that piled up while we were caring for her. We did it for the family unit. He was using the moral weapon. He was trying to frame the theft as a noble sacrifice. The judge did not look moved. He looked bored. So you are telling me that you commingled estate funds with your personal funds to pay your own debts. Is that correct? I am telling you, I saved my family, my father shouted. Tara touched my arm. It was time. Your Honor, Tara said. Standing up, the judge looked at her. Ms. Winslow, if I may, Tara said, the petitioner has prepared a document that might clarify the timeline and the intent. I stood up. My legs felt steady. I picked up the settlement offer, the paper I had drafted at my kitchen table, the one they had refused to sign. I walked to the bench. The bailiff took the document and handed it to the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. This is a settlement agreement I offered to my parents 3 days ago. It requests a simple repayment plan and an acknowledgement of the facts. I did not want to bring this into your courtroom. I wanted to handle this privately. I offered them a quiet exit. They refused because they would not admit that the money was taken without my consent. The judge read the document. He read the section about the repayment. He read the section about the bond. He looked up. He looked at my parents. You refuse this? The judge asked. My mother stood up. Her face was flushed. We refused it because it is a lie, she cried. She wants us to confess to stealing. We did not steal. We are her parents. The judge looked at the bank records Tara had submitted. He looked at the withdrawal slip from October 15th. He looked at the travel receipts from my trip to Portland. He took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Then he looked directly at my parents. His expression was not angry. It was confused. It was the look of a man trying to understand why anyone would choose to jump off a cliff when there was a perfectly good ladder right next to them. Mr. and Mrs. Stewart, the judge said. The room held its breath. Why didn't you just tell her the truth the first time? The question hung in the air. It cracked the room open. It wasn't a legal question. It was a human question. Why the lies? Why the forgery? Why the gaslighting? Why not just say, we are broke and we need help? My mother started to cry. It wasn't the pretty, single tear crying she had done in the hallway. It was an ugly, gasping sound. She collapsed into her chair, covering her face with her hands. My father turned on her. I told you we should have handled it differently, he hissed, his whisper loud enough to be heard by everyone. I told you she would check the accounts. I handled it. My mother shrieked, dropping her hands. You were the one who bought the boat. You were the one who said we could float the loan until the spring. I did not buy a boat, my father shouted. It was a lease. They were turning on each other. The united front was dissolving. The we was becoming you. The judge banged his gavel. Quiet, he ordered. The room fell silent again. Except for my mother's ragged breathing, the judge looked at the back of the room. Marissa Stewart, he asked. Marissa stood up. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She looked terrified, but she did not look down. Yes, Your Honor, she said. You are the sister, the one who received the funds. Yes, sir. The judge looked at the file. Your parents claim the money was used to purchase a home for you. Is this true? Marissa took a breath. I saw her look at our parents. My father was glaring at her, a warning in his eyes. My mother was sobbing. Then she looked at me. It was used for a down payment. Marissa said, her voice shaking but clear, but the house is in their name. And I only received $40,000. A murmur went through the courtroom. 40,000, the judge repeated, and the rest I do not know. Marissa said, I never saw it. She sat down. Her words landed like a heavy steel door shutting on a vault. My father slumped in his chair. He looked suddenly old, The blazer looked too big for him. The air of authority had evaporated, leaving only a tired man who had spent money he did not have. The judge wrote something on his notepad. He wrote for a long time. The sound of his pen scratching against the paper was the only sound in the world. Then he looked up. "The court finds that the accounting provided by the executors is insufficient," he said. "The court further finds that there is substantial evidence of commingling of funds and unauthorized transfers." He paused. "Mr. Henderson, I am removing your clients as executors effective immediately. I am appointing an independent administrator to take control of the remaining assets." My father closed his eyes. "Furthermore," the judge continued, looking at the withdrawal slip, "I am troubled by the discrepancy regarding the signature on the October 15th withdrawal. This court has a mandatory obligation to refer suspected instances of fraud to the district attorney's office for review." My mother let out a low wail. "However," the judge said, raising a hand. He looked at me. "Ms. Stewart, you are the primary beneficiary harmed here. You have also indicated in your settlement offer, which is now part of the record, that your primary goal is restitution, not prosecution." I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge leaned back. "The referral to the district attorney is mandatory for the fraud." He said, "But the insurance bond? That is a civil matter. If I make a finding of malfeasance today, the bond company will be triggered immediately. They will pay you, and they will liquidate your parents' assets to recover their loss. They will take the house. They will take the cars. Your parents will be left with nothing." He looked at my parents, then back at me. "The court needs one final clarification before I issue the ruling on the malfeasance." The room seemed to tilt. This was the edge. "Ms. Stewart," the judge said, "if the court orders your parents to sign the confession of judgment, you drafted the one agreeing to the repayment plan and the transfer of the deed to your sister. Will you withdraw the request for the finding of malfeasance against the bond?" I stared at him. He was giving me the choice. He was giving me the power to decide if they lost their home, if I said no. I got my money instantly from the insurance company, and they were destroyed. If I said yes, I got a payment plan that would take 20 years. But they kept their roof. I looked at my parents. My mother was looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. My father was looking at the floor. Defeated. They were small. They were so small. I thought about the letter in the cookbook. "Trust your instincts." I thought about the voice memo. "I can love you and still hold you accountable." I realized then that I did not want their destruction. I did not want their house. I just wanted them to be unable to lie to me ever again. I felt a strange peace settle over me. It was not victory. It was not relief. It was just the end of the noise, the end of the gaslighting, the end of the wondering. I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. "Your Honor," I said. The judge waited. My parents waited. Marissa waited. I took a breath, and I prepared to give the answer that would define the rest of my life. I looked at the judge and asked the question that nobody expected. "If I agree to withdraw the bond claim, Your Honor, can the court ensure that the repayment comes directly from their pension garnishment, so I never have to speak to them about money again?" The judge blinked. A slow smile spread across his face. "Yes, Ms. Stewart," he said. "We can certainly arrange that." I looked at my parents one last time. "Then I will take the deal," I said. I sat down. The gavel banged. It was over. I had my dignity. I had my truth. And for the first time in 33 years, I was free. Thank you so much for listening to Vivian's story. Writing this journey of reclaiming self-respect and uncovering the truth has been an emotional ride, and I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below and tell me which part of the story shocked you the most. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more dramas about family secrets, betrayal, and justice. Do not forget to share your thoughts in English in the comments section. I read every single one. Until next time, protect your peace and trust your instincts.